Welcome back, you PetaPixel party planners. It is Chris Nichols here, and today we have quite the battle for you because we are doing our roundup of the top and high-level enthusiast cameras from Sony, Nikon, and Canon. We're looking at the Sony a7R V versus the Nikon Z8 versus the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, and it's gonna be nasty. Okay, so let's say that you watch our roundup video here and you have a Sony a7R V and you say, that was a mistake, I wish I bought a Nikon Z8, or vice versa. Or maybe you say, forget it, I want an R5 Mark II from whatever gear I have already. What are you gonna do to make that happen? You're gonna go to KH.com. It's the best way to get rid of your used gear. So first off, you can use KH's online quote generator, or you can schedule an appointment with one of their gear buyers. And this way, you're not dealing with some shady person in the street or, flaky buyers or anything like that that won't show up to meet to buy your gear, and you're gonna get a fair and honest price. Switching mounts is a daunting prospect. You don't want to do it alone, so trust KH to help you through that process. And when you want to get the new gear, you know that all the stuff that you're gonna buy there is evaluated by the experts, it's gonna be taken care of, and you get a generous return and warranty period. That is why KH.com is PetaPixel's preferred pre-owned camera gear partner. Okay, so we already did a previous video where we did the Sony a7R V versus the Nikon Z8. And at the time, the Canon EOS R5 was just getting a little bit long in the tooth, and we kind of had a feeling like there might be something new on the horizon. So we left the R5 out of it, but now we have all three. And we're looking at the cameras that give you really high resolution, similar price point, very capable all-around cameras, but they don't get up into the flagship cameras of the top tier. That's our goal today. But as you're gonna see, these cameras all have strengths and weaknesses that are gonna show themselves throughout this battle. Okay, so our first category, handling. I hate this category because, when it comes to handling and ergonomics, it's such a subjective thing based on the individual using it. And all three of these cameras handle really well. So third place, it's gonna be the Nikon Z8, which I love. I love the handling on this camera. I mean, Jordan really loves the grip on this. I do find it a little bit too large for my hands, but we only have dual control dials. The other cameras give us triple control dials, but I mean, it's fine. I love the autofocus control. I like the way the camera feels otherwise. The menus are good. The Nikon Z8 handles beautifully.
But it's third place.
Yeah, it's third place. Okay, so in number 2 place, the Sony a7R V, and I know this is a hot take and everybody's throwing things at their monitor and they don't agree with me, and I get it, and that's because it is so subjective. It's not a very sexy camera. I don't like the fact that there's only a locking switch on one of the control dials and not the other, and for a lot of people this might feel small and cramped, but that's exactly why I like it. It fits my hand really well, and I think that's what's so important about ergonomics, is it is really dependent on the person using it. Their menus are improved. I like the way that everything's laid out, given the smaller real estate. It does have triple control dials that you can customize. And so, you know what? I gave this the win over the Nikon Z8 last time in our roundup. I think it really is still a better option for me. All right, our number 1 camera, the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. This really is the Goldilocks of cameras here. Not too big, not too small, comfortable for pretty much anybody who handles it. Great grip and really good control structure here. We always loved the EOS R5. We thought it handled really well, ergonomically really beautiful, but it had an issue where your photo and video switch was the info button when you went into the menu. It was kind of convoluted, and the power button was off here on the left. It threw a lot of people off, and they fixed that in one stroke by putting now a photo video selector switch over here and putting the on-off switch back to your trigger finger. And I think that's great. More importantly though, I love a camera I can just pick up and everything makes sense and I can adjust things quickly. I love the quick menu here. I bring it up, I've got touchscreen controls for all the stuff. It works really well. I can manipulate controls various ways, and it just all makes sense to pretty much anybody who picks it up. Our next category, displays, and in third place again, sadly, it's the Nikon Z8, and that largely just comes down to the fact that the EVF resolution lags behind the competition. It's a beautiful EVF for sports and action. I mean, it refreshes now at a very fast 120 frames per second, no lag, very smooth to look through, so it's still nice for that, but it just doesn't have that playback resolution that I really like for high megapixel cameras. As well, the back panel. Now, this does have interesting articulation. It's not quite full, but it's fantastic for photography, but videographers are still going to want something more. I know for a lot of you, this is actually a plus. Fair game. I totally agree with that. I get it, but I do prefer something that fully articulates into a selfie screen as well. Second place, Canon EOS R5 Mark II, 5.76 million EVF, refreshes fast, good for sports and action, fully articulating panel in the very classic Canon style, which I know a lot of you hate, but it's a very functional system, good display, and decent for the value of the camera. But the winner very clearly has to be the Sony a7R. So first off, this has one of Sony's beautiful 9.44 million EVFs, and it also refreshes very fast and quick. But it also has one of the most thoughtful back panel designs. I mean, this does have the fully articulating design like a Canon, but it also has a vertical tilt mechanism like the Nikon, and it's less convoluted than the Nikon's articulation, and it just gives you the ultimate in flexibility. Use it however you want. It makes a ton of sense. The best design we've seen so far. All right, it's time for image quality, another category which I hate because all three of these cameras take beautiful images, and I don't think we should split hairs like this, but we're going to anyways. Third place, there's got to be one. It's the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. And look, it's got a great 45 megapixel sensor, very good dynamic range, but really the main thing that detracts here is the baked-in noise reduction. Canon likes to do this, and it's kind of cheating. It means that your shadow detail looks very clean when you compare it against its competition, but you're giving up a bit of detail to do that, and it's not something that you can reverse. And so unfortunately, that irks us a little bit. All right, number two, it is the Nikon Z8. And what Nikon have done with this electronic shutter only stack sensor is quite remarkable. 45 megapixels, great amount of detail, good dynamic range. And normally electronic shutter cameras lose quite a bit of dynamic range, but we've got a base ISO of 64 here. That helps to make up for some of that shadow noise. It's actually very comparable and very close to the competition, but there's no baked in noise reduction. You do get a slight advantage over the Canon EOS R5, and that earns it second place. Okay, the winner is the Sony a7R. No disputing, Sony pulls beautiful raw image quality out of this 60 megapixel sensor. So first off, the electronic shutter, yucky. I mean, we lose dynamic range there, but when we're in mechanical shutter mode, this sensor dominates. I mean, at the lower ISOs, you're gonna get better dynamic range than the other two cameras, and that carries through even when you start getting into the higher ISOs, shooting in low light situations. And then couple on top of that, the fact that this does give you extra megapixels over the other two cameras. I know that's not the be all end all, but if you can get extra megapixels and still have the best dynamic range, well, that does make you the clear winner of our competition for image quality. Our next category, we're changing a little bit from what we've done in the past. We're actually going to make this about sort of autofocus and burst rates together as an action photography category. Because the fact of the matter is, all these modern cameras now do a great job focusing on eye detect focus and taking casual shots, family stuff, and just on the street. They'll do a great job. But what's the difference if you want to push things further and get into real action photography? Well, third place, it's going to be the Sony a7R. Now, we have always talked about how great the autofocus is in here. The real-time tracking is beautiful, and most importantly, it's simple. It just always works. But otherwise, they're very convoluted when it gets down deep into the autofocusing menus. We find the autofocus performance is good on this camera, but you're not getting great burst rates to back it up. We can only shoot up to 6 frames per second with full quality RAW. If we're willing to go to a lossy compressed format, we could push that to 10, but that's still not that fast for sports and action. So this is a great camera for everything else, not necessarily for that. Okay, so who's our number 2 position? It's the Nikon Z8. So we've previously said that the Sony has slightly more consistent autofocus than this camera, and that's true, although this is very good now. There's been some firmware updates. It does a really nice job with wildlife now. It's not fooled as much in certain situations with heavy rain and snow, but I still find the hit rate here, although almost perfect, sometimes misses. But this also backs everything up with fantastic rugged design, excellent balance with long lenses, and incredibly good burst rates. This is an electronic shutter camera with the cleanest rolling shutter out of all 3 cameras if you are going to shoot electronic shutter on the other 2 platforms. And this will shoot 20 frames per second full quality RAWs with autofocus, which is usually as much or more than anybody's ever going to need. So this is a very reliable action platform. And so our number 1 for action and sports camera, it's actually the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. I mean, this is basically as good as the top tier EOS R1, and that's thanks to a very new autofocusing system. First off, I love that Canon simplified the menu system. On top of that, it's a very reliable autofocusing system for eye detect. They've always had great wildlife detection, but Canon has also added this new action priority mode, and this is sports specific. Right now, we've got soccer, basketball, and volleyball, and this is really cool because it enhances your hit rate by letting the camera know things that it has to prioritize and ignore. For example, like don't worry about the volleyball net, you want the player's face as they come above it. This is is really doing a fantastic job for sports and action. It's a simple system and it works. And lastly, let's talk about the infamous eye control autofocus. If you're one of the lucky few and it works with your eyes like it does mine, I find it actually to be a very simple, intuitive way to start your autofocusing exactly where you want it just by looking with your eyeballs. If you're one of the majority where it just doesn't work very well, I mean, you've got a lot of other great autofocusing modes that you can back it up with, and they all work very consistently. So, a very interesting win for the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, our winner when it comes to action and sports shooting.
All right, it's my face, so you know what that means. It's time to talk about video, and in last place, it's gonna be the Sony a7R5. We've talked about how this 60 megapixel backside illuminated sensor is just not great for video. Yes, it gives you 8K recording, but with just terrible rolling shutter performance on it that makes it unusable for moving the camera. And if you're shooting any of the 4K modes, I'm sorry, but they're gonna be either cropped or subsampled. So this is capable of shooting like video for the odd clip, but it's not a great video camera like the other two. Second place, it's gonna go to the Canon R5 Mark II, and I think video is actually the biggest upgrade over the previous R5. The move over to a stacked sensor means we get Canon's C-Log 2, finally a good log profile from Canon in a hybrid mirrorless camera, but also rolling shutter is greatly reduced, and they put in a waveform, my favorite way to meter out scenes. The Canon also offers internal raw video recording, and it's editable on most editing software. But oddly, even though this sensor is fast enough, this still gives us subsampled 4K 60. I was really hoping for a more detailed image. But for my top pick, it's the Nikon Z8, and I have said repeatedly, if I needed a camera that could do a professional job for photography and video in one body, this is my top pick overall. And that's for a few reasons. I think this has the best interface for implementing tracking autofocus in video, especially if you're using the electronic viewfinder. Also, we get oversampled 4K 60p with a very detailed image that's great in low light. The Nikon and Canon both give you raw recording, but if you shoot log, I love that Nikon is now working with red, and they've released a series of LUTs to give you kind of a red look with your Nikon N-Log footage that is absolutely gorgeous. Some of my favorite LUTs currently available, and they're only going to work with the Nikon #1 pick.
Okay, so let's tally up our points. It looks like Canon actually has the most points here, then Nikon, and then Sony. And that's interesting, but remember, we've changed things up. I mean, Sony last time in our competition, we gave points for autofocus separate from burst rates. We also gave them points for lens selection, and really, we're trying to leave that out and simplify things here. And you know what, in the end, who gives a about the points? That doesn't mean anything. It's really just a way to form discussion and really read between the lines and see which of these cameras has strengths and weaknesses that might suit you best. I mean, the fact of the matter is the Canon EOS R5 Mark II really impressed us when it first came out. It can shoot sports and action, it's got decent image quality and fantastic handling. And then the Nikon Z8 still proves to be an awesome camera. I mean, it's got fast burst rates, good autofocus. A lot of people are going to prefer the way the panel articulates and the fact that the body is rugged and larger and balances nice with big glass. And then it's also the best video camera. So as a hybrid tool, it's an awesome choice. The Sony a7R5 is starting to show its age. It's getting older, but it still gives you the best raw dynamic range and the highest megapixel count. Fantastic, very simple autofocus to get into and use. You know, maybe it's not the best sports camera, maybe it's not the best video camera. Those are distinct weaknesses, but if you're looking for something more photography based, it's hard to beat. We always love making these roundup videos. It's just a nice way to gain perspective on where the industry is going. And I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Let us know. Leave those in the comments below. We always check that out on the PetaPixel podcast, which plays on this exact same channel on all your favorite podcasting apps. Listen to us while you do the laundry this time. Why not? That sounds like a good way to do it. Also, the merch store. We are revamping it. You should definitely check that out in the months to come because there'll be all new stuff there. Just go to store.petapixel.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon with more on PetaPixel.